Right now, let's get reaction on the withdrawal of Eskom's PFMA exemption. Economist Professor Bonke Dumisa speaks to us now just to tell us his thoughts around it. Prof, thank you very much for your time here on eNCA. I'm sure as an economist, you did have your concerns when this was gazetted. And I just want to know your reaction to the decision to renege by government earlier today.
The decision which was made by the government today through the Minister of Finance was not unexpected. But having said that, it was not unexpected because there was a lot of public pressure on the National Treasury to change its mind on this. We must remember that the exemption notice that they did gazette on Friday, the 31st of March, was exactly the same as what they filed last year for Transnet. And for Transnet, it is working and no one made an issue out of it. But in this particular case, I do not blame all the NGOs and opposition parties, including some members of the ANC who were questioning why do this thing when there's so much spotlight on Transnet. The reason why the minister explained at length what they're trying to do, all they're trying to say is we've got a very good legislation called the Public Finance Management Act. And as part of its objectives, it clearly states that it is aimed at making sure that the national government and provincial governments account fully for their assets, liabilities, and revenue. But what the exemption was aimed at doing, it was saying that because the PFMA is so thorough in governing what happens, there are times when they need to be very agile and make decisions on the spot. And the PFMA makes it very difficult for them to make decisions along those lines. And that's why they came up with this thing. Unfortunately, the manner in which they explained it was not so clear, and people were in no mood of listening to this. And I think you heard the minister. The minister said he is withdrawing this for now, because he's going to consult the office of the Auditor General. Let us be happy then that maybe he should have done that in the first place, going to the office of the Auditor General and saying, we may have these problems with you coming up and saying all these disclaimers because of what Eskom has done, and we're trying to avoid that one. What can we do working together?
Yeah, and talking about the Auditor General, Prof, you know, our understanding from experts that we've spoken to earlier this week is that had this exemption been approved and went through, it was going to make life a bit more difficult for the Auditor General because of the fact that if, for instance, you saw wasteful and fruitless expenditure in the beginning of an annual report, suddenly it would be at page 400 that she would have to search for. So do you think she would even agree to this exemption at all, even with the explanations they've given?
I think they will look at this whole thing pragmatically, because the people who are opposed to this exemption have got very good grounds to oppose. I mean, Eskom is embroiled in a lot of corruption, and unfortunately, most of it is from inside. So some of the people who are inside Eskom may use this as an excuse for them doing even more damage than before. So they must both find a way to say, how can these things be dealt with without making the work of Dr. Jose Sputla Ramahoba in dealing in an agile manner with all the challenges at Eskom, where they may have to make some quick decisions on the spot.
And, you know, just help us understand something as an economist and somebody who understands numbers definitely more than I do. Although they said they are withdrawing the gazette for now, they still continue to justify the initial decision, right? And one of the things that they said was that they blame partly, of course, and it sounded hugely, Eskom on South Africa's grey listing, saying that because Eskom asks National Treasury for bailouts so often, it puts pressure on the fiscus, and because Eskom is so corrupt within, it contributed a lot to the country being grey-listed. But as an economist, do you think that the exemption from the PFMA would have assisted in the grey-listing and where we are today?
Definitely not. I think there in Zulu they say you are simply trying to hide yourself behind your thumb. They just had to be clear that grey listing really has very little to do with Eskom, but it may have a lot to do with the corrupt people who are using Eskom as their vehicle for corruption. So all they needed to do was, we are just trying to make things much easier to move very fast, because to solve the load shedding at Eskom, you need to make many decisions so quickly, and you may actually have one service provider who's suitable for that quick action. And if you were to follow the PFMA, you need to get 3 codes for everything, etc., and to use exemptions through that thing is a very difficult process. That's why this is just an administrative thing. Maybe they undermined or they underestimated the consumer and the South African response to this thing, because we have a serious problem we have a trust deficit in South Africa, where the general public is not really trusting everything that the government does. So when you come up with that very short notice where you did not explain why you're doing this thing, they were bound to take it on. But I still agree with the rationale for the National Treasury to try to come up with this notice as they did for Transnet, and it seems to be working.
All right. Well, thank you very much for speaking to us, Professor Bonke Dumisa, an economist there, reacting to today's breaking news that National Treasury has decided to withdraw its gazette on the exemption of Eskom from the PFMA for now.